Hello, very good evening. In previous class, we've been talking about PHP. Today, basically, we will discuss looping and branching within PHP. Now, looping basically means being able to loop certain statements again and again, multiple times. Okay. In computer programming, a loop is basically a sequence of instructions that is continuously being repeated until a certain condition becomes true or becomes false. For example, you want a certain statements to execute 20 times, but that means that 20 times is the condition. So in order to execute the statement in 20 times, you don't repeat the same statement 20 times. In fact, we use something called loops. What loops allows us to do is we put the condition or the statement inside a loop body, and then we repeat it 20 times, and we put a condition there that as long as this condition is satisfied, the loop will execute, and once it reaches to 20 times, the condition becomes false. It then exits that particular loop. Okay, loop executes a particular block of code a specified number of times or while a specified condition is true. Loop lets you write a simple statement, produce significantly greater results by a simple repetition of that particular code. In general, statements are executed sequentially. The first statement and function is executed first, followed by the second, and so on and so forth. Loop statements allows us to execute statement or a group of statements multiple times. So types of loops. In PHP, we have basic 3 types of loops. Like every other loop exists in every other language. Okay, while loop, for loop, and do while loop. We have been discussing this in JavaScript as well. The same loop exists in Java, C++, C language, and almost the syntax and structure is also same. Let's again discuss it very quickly. While loop statements are repeatedly executes a target statement as long as a given condition is true. The typical syntax of a while loop is while condition, block start, block close, and the statements. Okay, here the statement may be a single statement or a block of statements with a condition may be any expression and true as non-zero value. The loop iterates while the condition is true, and when the condition becomes false, the program automatically passes and exits the loop. For example, we write $a. Now in PHP, remember we talked about that we need to write a dollar sign with every single variable. In JavaScript, we use the var sign. In PHP, we use $a is equal to 10. So for example, we declared a variable with a value 10. So we write a condition here. We write a loop $a. This is the variable is less than 20. So this is the condition that we referred about. Using a relational operator, this conditional statement will always result in either true or false. While loop requires a condition to be either true or false. This is what they require basically. So we write the condition so that the situation or based on the variable or based on the data, the result may be either true or false. If the result is true, whatever resides within the body of this while loop will execute. If the result is false, the loop will exit and no longer execute any of the body. The way the loop works is basically it will start to execute this block of code every time again and again repetitively as long as this condition is true. As long as it returns true, the loop will actually automatically repeat itself. So first time is equal to 10, while a this variable contains a value 10 is less than equal to 20. This is a relational operator that evaluates a relation between a and this data. Okay, so a is again another variable and operand, and this is the data value 20. It evaluates whether the a value is less than 20. We said yes, the condition is true. Once the condition becomes true, the body of the loop executes and then automatically it repeats itself. This is the feature that has been built inside every loop. So the statements are basically executing again. Within its body, now we can write any form of legal statements. They will be basically repeating itself. For example, in this case, we wrote echo. Now, echo again is the statement we write in PHP to print output on a web page. To print the data on a web page, we use a statement called echo. Bracket starts value of a. Again, this is a string. Whatever we write here will appear exactly without anything. Then we use a dot operator as a connection operator to connect the value of a. So the first moment, the value of a is printed as 10. Dot is basically connection operator, joining operator that joins this string with the variable value of a. In JavaScript, we use the plus sign. In Java, we use the plus sign. However, in a PHP, we instead of plus join two variable values or two string values, we use a dot operator. Keeping that thing in mind, we use $, A, which basically connects this string value with this string value. Now it will print the value of A on our web browser. Then the next line, echo br, which basically means new line. This is again an HTML. Like in JavaScript, we can again print the value of HTML codes or tags of HTML codes within our PHP as well. And that is how basically we generate a completely dynamic website. We'll talk about that later on. Next, what we did is we did an increment. Now, $A is again a variable that holds a value 10. This is plus representing an increment, which basically means we increment the variable value by 1. This is an increment operator. It automatically adds a +1 to this variable value and adds, assigns it itself. Okay, so this basically means A is equal to A plus 1. So take the value of A, added 1 and then assign it back to A. So A increment, so A basically gets plus 1. So next time when the block executes, actually you would find the value 11 now. The value of A would now be 11 because it has incremented by that point. So now the next time loop comes in, here it will find it 11. This is how the conditions are met. This time it will evaluate 11 is less than 20, again is true. Now come here, now reprint, and this time it will print 11 value. That 11 is printed on screen, br for new line, and then A again from 11 will get increment to 12. And then again the loop will execute. And the 13, then 14, and then 15, up till the condition is satisfied or becomes false, in other words. So this is how a simple loop executes. Similarly, this is the output that would be generated when the above code is executed. The value of A initially becomes 10. The next time it increments to 11, the condition is evaluated, the output is printed. The third time again the value is incremented, the condition is evaluated, the output is printed. Then again the condition increment is done, the condition is evaluated, the out statements are printed. So the loop will execute itself almost 10 times and print the statements until the value of A becomes 20. Now the loop becomes false and it exits the body. This is what basically this code does. Okay. So even though it's just these simple lines, you can execute this code as many number of times as you want. So for example, if you want to run for 2000 times, still the number of lines is same, only you just write 2000 here instead of 20. This 4 lines will now execute 2000 times. This is why we use loops, to repeat certain code until a condition becomes true. For now, a for loop, again one of the most common loops used. For loop allows a statement to be executed a specified number of times, similar to while as well. However, the syntax is a little bit different. In a for loop, we use 3 basic statements: initialization, condition, increment or decrement statements. Initialization, condition statements, increment or decrement statements. Then a block start, block close in the given statements. This is exactly same as loops in JavaScript as well, in Java as well, in C++ or any other language for that matter. The initial step only executes for the one time only. Then the condition, which is evaluated again every time, increment operator. This 3-part statement, the initialization always executes only one time. It's one thing that we need to keep in mind. Okay. The next time the condition is evaluated, if it is true, the body of the loop is executed. If it is false, the body of loop does not execute and flow of control jumps to the next statement. After the body of the loop executes, the flow of control jumps back to the increment statement. This statement allows you to update the loop control variables. This statement can be blank or as a semicolon appears after the condition. Condition is now evaluated again. If it is true, loop executes. So for example, this is what we tend to do. We write an initialization statement. For example, we declare an integer variable $A is equals to 10. This is called initialization. This statement executes only once. Semicolon is a mandatory part of a for loop within its brackets. So don't forget that. Every time we write a for loop, we write this for in a 3-part statement: initialization, condition statement, then increment. After initialization, there is a semicolon. It's a mandatory thing. We write a conditional statement, again a semicolon, mandatory thing. Then increment operator, now there is no need of a semicolon. So Basically, you need to write semicolons to separate the statements. Since this bracket ends, there is no semicolon required here. Now, initialization basically means we initialize a variable value, we set a condition, and then we assign it an increment. This can be any form of statement as well, in fact. So, we can write a is equal to a plus 1, or you can write $a plus plus as well. Here we write the statement echo value of $a dot $a echo br. Now, this does exactly same thing that we did in while loop. However, we just changed the syntax a little bit. We did initialization, condition, and increment all in one line. In a while loop, if you remember, the initialization was done before the while loop, the condition was determined within the while loop, and the increment was done inside the while loop. However, for loop, all these three statements actually are appearing exactly in the same line. So, while or for technically are same if you understand the structure of it. Now, do while loop. Unlike for and while loops, which test the loop's condition at the start, the top of the loop, the do while actually checks the condition at the end of the loop. For example, a do while is similar to while loop, however, with one main change, that there is a while statement and the condition is there, which is actually after the statements. In other words, we use the do word, block start the statements, then the condition. In previous two, while and for while, the condition was evaluated first. However, do loop, we use do, block start, block close, and statements. This basically means that the statements are executed first, then the condition is evaluated. And while the condition is evaluated first, then statements. And for condition is evaluated first, then statements. In do while, statement gets executed first, then condition, which results in a very peculiar change that at least one time the loop will execute. At least one time the statements will execute, and then you write the condition. If the condition is false for the first time, still the statements get execute one time. The syntax difference is you write do, block start, block close. Within the block we write statements, and then while statement semicolon for the condition. Now, for example, we have the same example like previous two, however, using do while. This again $a is equal to 10. Do, block start, block close, and we write the statement echo value of $a quotation close dot $a sign. This time do we increment a plus plus. Again, same thing we did in for and while. Block close, the while a is less than equal to 20, then semicolon. So, structure wise, the content wise is basic same. The only thing we do is we write the statements first. When you write the statement first, which basically means that once it will come here, is equal to 10 will be initialized, do echo, it will execute the statement first, do the increment, then evaluate the condition. Okay. So, what if it becomes false? For example, we can say if we remove 2, just make it 0. This condition becomes false, loop will execute, which would mean that at least it has executed still one time. The statements will get print one time. This is not in the case for while and for loop. So, here the statements will execute at least the one time. If the condition is true, it will again echo, print, statement execute, increment, then again evaluate, check the condition. Condition is again true, loop will execute the same behavior. So, for while, do while, three main prominent loops that we use that are repeating first statements. Then let's talk about break statement. Break statement is basically used to stop the break of program flow, stop the loop at a certain point. Sometimes a situation arises where we want to exit from a loop immediately without waiting to get back to the conditional statements. The keyword break ends execution of the current for each. The keyword break ends execution of current for each, while, do while, or switch structures. When the keyword break execute inside a loop, the control automatically passes to the first statement outside of the particular loop. The syntax typically is we use break, bracket start, bracket close, and semicolon. That's all we need to do. For example, we write loop for a is equal to 10, a is less than 20, a plus plus. Echo value of a, same thing. However, we use a particular condition. We use a statement that if this condition is true, just break the loop. I don't want to go further. So we write if a condition. Usually, it's recommended that you use break with a if condition as well within a loop. And break normally are used within a loop, one thing, okay. They are recommended to always be written with if condition, so that when if condition becomes true, it breaks. What happens now is, if a is equals to 15, if this condition becomes true, break. What this will do, it will break the loop statement. Now typically we understood previously that whenever we use a for loop, it will execute based on this condition. So now you note that if the loop a value reaches 15, we used a break, and it will break regardless of this condition. Now it doesn't depend on this condition, it will break. So it's quite oftenly used in various different situations where we need to abruptly break a loop if a certain condition or certain data is matched, which can be, for example, searching. If you are using a very simple searching algorithm that goes through an array element and searches through each and individual array element, and it needs to find the data. So for example, if there are 20 items in an array and you are searching one by one, if it found the data in its array at for example 10 index, so you don't want the loop to execute the remaining 10 times, because you have already found the data or the text that you're looking for at the 10th index. So when it founds that index or founds that data, you want that loop to break abruptly. This is where the break statement is used, okay, so that the loop doesn't continue for the remaining 20 lines. If it found some data, just break it right there and then. This is the result of the break statement. So as soon as it executes, it finds a 15 statement, it breaks, rather than going to the next statement. Similar to break, there is something called a continue statement, which actually reciprocates break. In other words, basically it is opposite of break. Whereas break is used to stop a program loop, sometimes a situation arises where we want to take the control to the beginning of the loop. For example, for a while or do while, etc., skipping the rest of the statement inside the loop while have not yet been executed. The keyword continue allows us to do this. When a keyword continue executes inside a loop, the control automatically passes to the beginning of the loop. Break statement breaks the execution and comes out. Continue takes the statement back to this original state. This block or the syntax is, we write continue, small letters, bracket start, bracket close, and semicolon. For example, let's read this. We say again, for is equal to 10 is less than 20 a plus plus. Again, same structure. Here we have used if a is equals to 15. Now again, instead of using break, we use continue. What happens now is that we have placed the if condition before the statement. Okay. In previous examples, the if statements were out after it. So it depends how you use it. In this case, we use the if statement before we actually print the for statements. Now what happens here is that it checks the condition. If a is equals to 15, continue. So what happens here is echo value of a dot a br. At the first time it will print, the second time print, third time print, fourth time print. When it reaches to the 15 value, when this a becomes 15, this condition becomes true. Instead of going further, it says continue. So what it will do, it will come here and skip back to the for loop, skipping these two statements just one time, just for that 15 moment. So the output that we will get is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You would find 15 is missing. You would find 15 is missing. That is because we skipped that particular block. So continue skips these statements and goes back to the start, and the loop will continue next time. However, break statement would break the loop abruptly at that particular moment. Continue would allow us to continue in the remaining statements, skipping, breaking just one line. There are various different situations where we might again need to skip and read certain words and skip it. For example, you are reading a text and you are omitting all the full stops out. So what number of full stops you need to omit. So we traverse each text character, and as if we found full stop, skip it and then just put that words in. Okay. Or for example, removing spaces. We also use the same algorithm or same technique. We reach each character, string elements, and if you found a space, continue. So that space is basically omitted out and only the text characters are printed, and that 15 space character is basically missing. Alright. So similarly, there can be more examples as we go along. Loops again have what we call a nested structure. Nested structure means we have loop within a loop body. Loop within a loop means that you write a for loop, and within the body of a for loop we write another for loop. This is called loop inside a nested loop. Okay. The way or the behavior of this nested loop is basically based on the principle that each loop will execute based on its conditions. The way it works is that the for loop will execute for the first time, then the inner loop will execute and it will complete its all conditions. So the for loop executed one time and the inner loop will execute all its time. Then the for loop will execute second time, the outer loop. The inner loop will again execute the full number of times. So it will complete its execution this way. For example, we have used a nested loop example here where we have used a while loop as an outer loop and for loop as an inner loop. Now what happens is that $A we initialize it with 1, while A is less than equal to 3, we come inside this loop. For $B, again another variable B is less than equal to 3, another condition B plus plus. So we start the variable with B1, 3 times should execute and then B plus plus. Echo the value of A and B and BR. Okay. What this will now do is it will print the statements of inner loop, the outer loop statements and block close. Let me rephrase. So what we did here very simply is we created two loops. One is called while loop, which is the outer loop. Then we create inner loop called for loop. The outer loop again starts with 1 to 3 times. The inner loop also 1 to 3 times. The way it works is that outer loop executes for the first time. The inner loop executes. Within the inner loop, it needs to complete its execution. Okay. So the outer loop executes one time, the inner loop will execute all 4 times from 1 to 3, 3 times. So the outer loop executes one time, the inner loop executes 3 times. Then again the outer loop executes, the inner loop again executes 3 times. The outer loop executes again for the third time, the inner loop will again execute 3 times. So the outer loop will in total run for 3 times only. The outer loop from 1, 2 and 3. However, the inner loop for every inner time has executed 3 times, 3 times, 3 times. So every time a while loop executes, the inner loop executes 3 times. The while loop executes as a second time, inner loop again reinitializes, restarts from the out time and executes 3 times. So the output of this statement would basically be printed in such manner. The outer loop while executes the first time, the inner loop will execute 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. The value remains same. The outer loop again executes for the second time. The inner loop will print 1, 2, 3 again. It executes 3 times. Now the outer loop again prints for the third time. However, the inner loop again starts from 1, 1, 2, 3. That's because every time the inner loop executes, the initialization is done again. So it again starts from 1. This statement again gets evaluated, increment, print the value. This particular code we use the inner loop, then echo br plus plus. Okay, so this basically means this echo br will add this line here gaps. The statements are executed, echo br, statements are executed, echo br. Simple as that. Okay, I hope you understand the loops. Again, if any questions, any problem, don't forget to leave your comments down below and I will try to help that out. This is Dr. Zeeshan. Thank you very much for watching.